being a lockdown critic as I am, and I think more and more evidence continues to unfold when it comes to that. But just this week, I've posted on my timeline a study that is a peer-reviewed study, a huge peer-reviewed study done at Stanford University, which again indicates that the costs of going into lockdown far outweigh the costs of not going into lockdown. The evidence is still coming out about this, but if you go to my Twitter feed, I've now made it my pinned tweet, and I've just literally done, I think it's like over 20 tweets with all the various pieces and bits and threads and evidences that are the reason why I think that lockdowns aren't the best way to fight the virus. And it's important to phrase it in that way. This isn't COVID denial. Again, the reason why I think lockdowns are not the best way to fight the virus. This Stanford paper, as I say, Stanford University is well known, top US university, Ivy League. I think it's Ivy League, actually. It's a peer-reviewed study anyway. To quote from their conclusion, while small benefits cannot be excluded, we do not find significant benefits on case growth of lockdown, that is. Similar reductions may be achievable with less restrictive interventions. The entire purpose of the study was to find out whether lockdowns are better than not locking down, and they've concluded that there are small benefits, but again, we do not find significant benefits on case growth. Similar reductions may be achievable with less restrictive interventions. So that's the Stanford paper on that, and of course there's another one which I also posted, and this one was published by authors at Duke University, Harvard Medical School, and Johns Hopkins University Business School together. And again, just to quote to you directly their findings. And by the way, please note the ethnic minority disparity in these findings. And my regular listeners will know I've been going on about this for a long, long time. Soon, you're going to find how ethnic minorities have been both victims of a disproportionate impact of COVID because they've been in the front lines of fighting the disease, as members of my own family are, overwhelmingly. So when I speak about these things, please understand it comes from personal lived experience. And so not only have ethnic minorities been at the front line of fighting this, they're also at the front line of some of the criticism around some measures because probably they're in the front lines of fighting it, so they see things firsthand. And here's an example. Quoted directly from the study, as I say, papers by authors at Duke University, Harvard Medical School, and Johns Hopkins University Business School. Direct quote, over the next 20 years, 1.37 million more people will die than would have died without the unemployment shock that the pandemic lockdowns have caused. It is staggering. They also find that, quote, excess deaths will disproportionately affect African Americans. Another quote, these will far exceed those immediately related to the acute COVID-19 critical illness for the next 2 decades. So the academic studies are coming in thick about the whether or not lockdowns work. So add to that shutting down airports, and all I can really say is what makes sense to me is if early on we had shut the airports down, and this is cab driver wisdom, by the way. The cabbies were telling me this months ago. It's often important to listen to cab drivers because they speak to so many people, and they have this kind of common sense that sometimes eludes us higher-uppers in the ivory towers that read too much. So a lot of the cab drivers were telling me this a while back, that if only we'd shut the airports down, we could have continued. We're an island. Look, and again, as I say, I haven't looked too much at New Zealand, but if you do look to New Zealand, all I do know is early on, they came in with what would be described as draconian measures, but they had very few cases. They implemented these draconian measures, and because it's an island like us, the rest of it was history. We didn't do that early on. We didn't move in time. The virus was already here, so there was little we could do. There is now a case to be made about potential new strains, because this case is rational. I can see a rational argument for it, though again, forgive me, I would need to look more into this before I give you an absolute conclusion on it. But a basic rational case can be said that if there's a new strain discovered here, don't we have a duty not to export it to other countries? Likewise, if there's a new strain discovered in other countries, don't we have a duty to make sure it doesn't get imported here? Because we're already trying to deal with the original strain that we have. And so if you could approach this from an angle that would say, we don't need a national lockdown, that's not the best way to fight COVID. In fact, it may lead to more quality of life year losses. In other words, the equivalent of lives lost. What are known as QALYs is the acronym, quality of life years. Evidence indicates it does lead to more QALYs lost. So in fact, will it not make sense to say we don't need a national lockdown, but because we've discovered these new strains, which our population may develop an immunity to because we live among this new strain, and if you look in particular to the studies such as those reported in the BMJ about T-cell immunity, pre-existent T-cell immunity, which hasn't been spoken about enough, we may have more immunity than is assumed. However, other countries may not, because they may not have been exposed to the strains we've been exposed to in this country, and vice versa. So would it not make sense to have some form of border control while opening up our domestic situation? In other words, the inverse of what we're going through at the moment. And again, I caveat that by saying I'm not endorsing these current demands, because I haven't looked too much into where we are at the moment. This is just this morning's news. All I'm asking, I'm throwing up something for thought and really reinforcing my point that I don't think the national lockdown and continuing it is the solution even to these new strains.